This is Akayani of Akayani Music, and it is already Monday, September 27th, and we are well underway into fall. At least we are around here, where it has been kind of gray and misty. Our rainy season seems to be starting early. Normally, it wouldn't start until November, really, but such is the world these days. So I want to start off by thanking everyone who is going to watch this at some point later, and let you know that we are continuing with Canto 4, Chapter 4, the City of Nine Gates, specifically talking about King Puranjana and the entanglement he is about to get into. So once again, everything is an allegory here. And there's actually, quote, a real king named King Pratini who is sitting down with Narada Muni, the great sage Narada Muni. And Narada Muni has compassion upon King Pratini because he can see, what's coming. So this is the power of saints and sages and people who practice austerity and meditation. They actually become empowered, and they actually are given a lot of insight, not only for themselves, but more importantly for others. So Narada Muni was always interested in benefiting other people who he could see were walking on a tightrope. So this material world is like walking on a tightrope. It's said that spiritual life is kind of like a razor's edge. So we always want to try and be moving forward. I am going to start today, before we get into text 25, text 26, and text 27, which illustrates more of what we have talked about last week, where we ended on text 24. So text 24, su-nāsām sama-vrito nirantarao vrastratena niguhantim vridaya gajagaminim. That's Sanskrit, for those of you who don't know, or who may be watching this for the first time in Mantra Monday. I repeat or chant, sing the verses in Sanskrit first, and then give the transliteration, the translation, and then the purport. That's our formula here. Talking from the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, compiled by Srila Vyasadeva. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. All right, so basically text 24 was ending with the thought that a yogi, or a yogini, right? King Puranjana, this is being explained from the male point of view, or in other words, the soul that has taken birth in a male body. But these things also apply opposite. So 2 breasts represent attachment and envy. That's where we left off last week. So we are encouraged as yogis and yoginis not to become attached and not to indulge in that feeling of envy, and to really unpack the attraction of the material body, at least on an intellectual level, right? Because the sex impulse is extremely strong. It's what keeps us here in the material world, ultimately. Good morning, whoever's watching. And to understand that, basically you're looking at muscle, blood, with a covering of skin. And so there is some examples given last week at the end of the purport about how when one actually really is elevated in spiritual advancement and has a real taste, a higher taste from the process of self-realization, in a particular bhakti yoga, which is very nectarine and sweet, these other things that we used to take pleasure from, we don't care for it. We actually kind of find it gross. Not that we're necessarily condemning anyone, but you just lose your taste for it. And also, the example was given of Hanuman and different ways in which we can apply anger transcendentally, in which we can apply our lust transcendentally, right? So that example was given of being a karma yogi, a karma yoga. So you're doing, what you're doing every day. You're going to your job, you're going to work, you're performing your duties, but there's a change in your consciousness where your end, your goal really is Sri Krishna, is to please Sri Krishna. So we don't necessarily have to change our circumstances in life. That's what we've been doing as living entities, lifetime after lifetime, thinking, well, if I just change my body, or I change my place of residence, or I change my station in life, or I change my life form, or I go to another planet, or I go to another city, or I live this way, I live that way, I have this occupation, then I'll be happy. None of those things really make us happy. What makes us happy is an inner happiness when we're actually connected to the Supreme. Okay, so let's get into text 25 today. Tamaha lalitam vira savrida smita shobhanam snigdhanena panga punkena sprishta premo brahmad bhruvaha. Again, tamaha lalitam vira savrida smita shobhanam snigdhena panka punkena sprishta premo brahmad bhruvaha. If you'd like to follow along, the verse is actually in the description on whatever platform you're watching this on, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, my member area. One more time. Tamaha lalitam viraha savrita smita sobhanam snigdena pankapukena sprista premo brahmad bhruvaha. Translation, synonyms, tam. Unto her, aha, addressed, lalitam, very gently, viraha, the hero, savrida, the shyness, smita, smiling, shobhanam, very beautiful, snigdena, by sex desire, apangapukena, by the arrow of glancing, sprishtaha, thus pierced, prema udabramat, exciting love, bhruvaha, by the eyebrows. Translation, Puranjana, the hero, became attracted by the eyebrows and smiling face of the very beautiful girl, and was immediately pierced by the arrows of her lusty desires. When she smiled shyly, she looked very beautiful to Puranjana, who, although a hero, could not refrain from addressing her. So you'll remember in this analogy, the beautiful woman actually represents the intelligence, the living entity's intelligence. And she is going to become the queen of King Puranjana. Puranjana is our consciousness. Puranjana is a spirit soul. But the spirit soul cannot live in this material world without taking an embodied form, right? You have to take an embodied form, and then you need a special kind of, quote, software to be able to interface and to be able to interact and live in this atmosphere. So whatever planet or whatever atmosphere that you are on, you have to have a suitable body, correct? So if you go, the fish, for example, they have suitable bodies for living underwater. They can breathe underwater. They've been adapted that way. So here we are. Moving on to the purport. This is going to talk about the difference between being a victim of Maya and being the controller of one's own person, of one's own senses. Every living entity is a hero in two ways. When he is a victim of the illusory energy, he works as a great hero in the material world, as a great leader, politician, businessman, industrialist, and so on. and his heroic activities contribute to the material advancement of civilization. One can also become a hero by becoming a master of the senses, or a Goswami. Go means senses and Swami means master. Material activities are false heroic activities, whereas restraining the senses from material engagement is great heroism. However, a great hero one may be in the material world, he can be immediately conquered by the lumps of flesh and blood known as the breasts of women. Okay? So, we all know these examples in history of someone kind of losing it or losing everything because of a woman. Or, of course, a woman is also a great strength and a great inspiration for a man as well. So there's that side of the coin. But here, this chapter is really talking about the entanglement of the spirit soul and the material world, as we go on to differentiate here. In the history of material activities, there are many examples, like the Roman hero Antony, who became captivated by the beauty of Cleopatra. Similarly, a great hero in India named Bajirao became a victim of a woman during the time of Maharashtrian politics, and he was defeated. There's actually a really good movie called Bajirao Mastani, which gets into this whole thing. Of course, it's a musical because it's coming out of Bollywood, and I actually saw that movie. Gosh, it's been about 5 years now. It was playing in this little movie theater in Arizona, near in Mesa. Saw it with Nora. I digress. But if you have a chance, it's quite entertaining, and it's quite the production number, and it quite tragically spells out this whole story and what happens to him and actually what happens to them. Pretty sad. Also gets into prejudices and, people not being able to get along. From history, we understand that formerly politicians used to employ beautiful girls who were trained as Vishakanya. These girls had poison injected into their bodies from the beginning of their lives, so that in due course of time they would become so immune to the poison and so poisonous themselves that simply by kissing a person, they could kill him. So that's some James Bond stuff right there. So in politics, there's all kinds of dirty dealings. And if you want to take down your opponent, we've seen this happen in Washington ourselves, right? Right here in the US of A. There's always a scandal. You can do that, of course, by sending a beautiful woman, who may pretend to be in love with someone's political rival, and then, catch them in some kind of scandal, and then their lives and their political career is ruined. But in this case, in India, they would go even farther than that, and they would actually poison the political opponent by using these girls, these Vishyakanya. These poisonous girls were engaged to see an enemy and kill him with a kiss. Thus, there are many instances in human history of heroes who have been curbed simply by women. Being part and parcel of Krishna, the living entity is certainly a great hero, but due to his own weakness, he becomes attracted to the material features. Krishna bahirmukha hana boga vanchakare, nikatashta maya tare japatiya dare. It is said in the Prema Vivarta that when a living entity wants to enjoy material nature, he is immediately victimized by the material energy. A living entity is not forced to come into the material world. He makes his own choice, being attracted by beautiful women. So this basically means, when you're growing up, you have in the West, we don't have so much because we don't have this type of training. But in Vedic times in India, this was known. Saintly persons were respected, and it was known that there was a different path that you could go down. You didn't necessarily have to become entangled in family life. You could follow the path of renunciation, or you could even follow the path of renunciation, within your ashram, within your station in life. But here we don't know that so much. Every living entity has the freedom to be attracted by material nature or to stand as a hero and resist that attraction. It is simply a question of the living entities being attracted or not being attracted. There is no question of his being forced to come into contact with material energy. So this points to the fact that, when we start off in the spiritual world, Krishna, God doesn't force us to be there. We have free will at all times because we're made in the image of God, and God has the supreme free will. He can do whatever he wants, whenever he wants, eternally. So we also have that in minutia, of course, not as great as he does. So, if we want to leave, we can leave. So where are we going to go? We're going to come here to the material universe, which makes up a quarter of the entire creation. 3/4 of the entire creation is spiritual and is expanding unlimitedly. The material creation only makes up a quarter of the creation, according to the Vedic version. And we are free to explore and wander. But the material energy is also kind of compared to a beautiful woman, right? So, we become attracted by this and come here and become entangled, in all kinds of activities and so forth, all kinds of troubles, adventures, and so on. One who can keep himself steady and resist the attraction of material nature is certainly a hero and deserves to be called a Goswami. Unless one is a master of the senses, he cannot become a Goswami. The living entity can take one of two positions in this world. He may become a servant of his senses, or he may become a master of them. By becoming a servant of the senses, one becomes a great material hero, and by becoming master of the senses, he becomes a Goswami, or a spiritual hero. Actually, I don't know if I have the book in here, but there's a great little book called The Nectar of Instruction, compiled by Srila Rupa Goswami, one of the 6 Goswamis who were direct disciples of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who spent their retirement years, as it were, in Vrindavan, writing lots of books. And this little book, The Nectar of Instruction, actually explains how one can become a Goswami, how one can become a master of the senses, by controlling the tongue, by which you control, what's in the stomach, by which you can control the genitals. And also there's a beautiful explanation of the 6 exchanges of love between devotees, between bhaktas. It's a very, very nice book. You would think that something like that would be very voluminous, but it's only a very, very slim pamphlet, but it's very profound. Okay, let's move on to text 26. Katvam kanja pala shakshi kasya shiha kutta shati imam upa purim biru kim chikir shashi samshame. Okay, Sanskrit. Katvam kanja pala shakshi kasya shiha kutta shati imam upa purim biru kim chikir shashi samsame. Katvam kanja palak shakshi kaya shiha kutashati imam upa purim biru kim chikir shashi samshame. Word for word translation. Ka hu tvam you kanja palasha, like the petals of the lotus. Akshi, eyes. Kasya, whose. Ashi, you are. Iha, here. Kuta, where from. Sati, O chaste one. Imam, this. Upa, near. Purim, city. Biru, O timid one. Kim, what. Chikirshashi, you are trying to do. Shamsha, kindly explain. Me, unto me. Translation. My dear lotus-eyed, kindly explain to me where you are coming from, who you are, and whose daughter you are. You appear very chaste. What is the purpose of your coming here? What are you trying to do? Please explain all these things to me. Purport. The first aphorism in the Vedanta Sutra is Atato Brahma Ginasa. In the human form of life, one should put many questions to himself and to his intelligence. In the various forms of life, lower than human life, the intelligence does not go beyond the range of life's primary necessities, namely eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Dogs, cats, tigers are always busy trying to find something to eat or a place to sleep, trying to defend themselves and have sexual intercourse successfully, right? So if you see, animals in the wild, this is a big preoccupation, right? They're not going to the library and trying to read books. They're not, going out to apply for a job or typing up their resume. They are very busy in the business of survival and propagating their species and also trying to defend their turf. So in the human form of life, however, one should be intelligent enough to ask what he is, why he has come into the world, what his duty is, who is the supreme controller, what is the difference between dull matter and the living entity, and so forth. There are so many questions, and the person who is actually intelligent should simply inquire about the supreme source of everything. Ato Brahma Ginasa. A living entity is always connected with a certain amount of intelligence. So regardless, you can see that animals and birds and fish and so on and so forth, they definitely have intelligence. They definitely have God-given intelligence. Every living entity, non-moving or moving, has intelligence to be able to function and survive and think to the degree that they are capable within this atmosphere. However, in the human form of life, the living entity must inquire about a spiritual identity. This is real human intelligence. It is said that one who is simply conscious of the body is no better than an animal, even though he be in the human form. So in other words, we are meant to ask these different kinds of questions. What is the purpose of life? Why am I here? How did I get here? What happens after death? Where did I come from? Is there something beyond just what I'm experiencing every day on my day-to-day life? What happens to me, after I die? What is the purpose of life? What am I supposed to be doing? All of those things, And this is what makes us human, right? This is hopefully what makes us on a more spiritually advanced, compassionate level as human beings as we are supposed to be and meant to be, and respecting everything around us and our environment around us, because we understand that it's all an extension of the Supreme, right? Then it goes on to say, in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 15, verse 15, Sri Krishna says, Sarvasya chaham hridi sana vishto mata shmitir gyanam apohanam cha. I am seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. Okay, in the animal form, the living entity is completely forgetful of his relationship with God. This is called apohanam, or forgetfulness. In the human form of life, however, consciousness is more greatly developed, and consequently, the human being has a chance to understand his relationship with God. In the human form, one should utilize his intelligence by asking all these questions, just as Puranjana, the living entity, is asking the unknown girl where she has come from, what her business is, why she is present. These are inquiries about Atma Tattva, self-realization. The conclusion is that unless a living entity is inquisitive about self-realization, he is nothing but an animal, or maybe even less than an animal. Honestly, these days, the way you see people acting, right, who really have no awareness, at all, and what they're doing to poor animals. So This is not to put down animals. Actually, as Vaishnavas, we don't even eat animals. We don't hunt animals. We don't torture animals. But this is just an attempt, to appreciate the opportunity that we have in this form of life and to take advantage of it. You're probably not going to see a deer sitting in meditation, right? A deer is usually in a very, very fearful, nervous state because they understand that they are prey for many, many animals, human beings, but who like to go out hunting, but, tigers and mountain lions and so on and so forth. So they're always alert and aware, and usually they won't stay in one place very long. They're moving. So they don't have the facility, just because of the body that they're born in, to conduct this kind of activity, right? Text 27. Ka ate nupata yeta ekadasha mahabhataha etava lalana subru koyamte hi pura sharaha. Ka ete nupata yeta ekadasha mahabhata etava lalana subru koyam tehi pura sara. Ka ete nupata yeta ekadasha mahabhata etava lalana subru koyam tehi pura sara. One more time. Ka eta nupata yeta ekadasha mahabhata etava lalana subru koyam tehi pura sara. Word for word translation. Ke, who, ete, all these. Anupataha, followers. Ye, they who. Te, your. Ikadasha, 11. Mahabhataha, very powerful. Bodyguards. Itaha, all of these. Va, also. Lalanaha, women. Subru, O beautiful eyed one. Kaha, who, I am this. Te, your. Ahi, the snake. Puraha, in front. Saraha, going. Translation. My dear lotus-eyed, who are those 11 strong bodyguards with you? And who are those 10 specific servants? Who are those women following the 10 servants? And who is the snake that is preceding you? Purport. The 10 strong servants of the mind are the 5 working senses and the 5 knowledge-gathering senses. All these 10 senses work under the aegis of the mind. The mind and the 10 senses combine to become 11 strong bodyguards. So remember, we are in the city of 9 gates, right? So, the body, knowledge-acquiring senses, the mouth, taste. Through taste, the tongue can tell what something is, and through the texture. Then we have the nose, we have the nostrils. So through aroma, right, we can also discern things. The nose knows. The eyes, by seeing, we have that power of discernment, and also by hearing. We have the 2 ear holes. Then we have the genitals, which is a working sense, and then we have the anus to be able to evacuate. The 10 strong servants of the mind are the 5 working senses and the 5 knowledge-gathering senses. We have our arms, we have our legs, we have our hands. The mind and the 10 senses combine to become 11 strong bodyguards. The hundreds of women under the jurisdiction of the senses are addressed here as lalanaha. The mind works under the intelligence, and under the mind are the 10 senses, and under the 10 senses are innumerable desires to be fulfilled. Right. So the mind is considered to be a sense organ. All these, however, depend on the vital life force, which is here represented by the snake. So last week we went through that, right? We went through the different life airs and how they function in the body. As long as the vital life force is there, the mind works, and under the mind, the senses works, and the senses give rise to so many material desires. Actually, the living entity, known as Puranjana, is embarrassed by so much paraphernalia. All this paraphernalia simply constitutes different sources of anxiety, but one who is surrendered unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead and who leaves all business to Him is freed from such anxieties. Therefore, Prahlad Maharaj advises a person who has taken to the materialistic way of life, which is never permanent, but always temporary, to take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead and leave aside all his so-called responsibilities in order to get free from all anxieties. So this is reminding me of the story about there's a person, I don't know if they're a sage, but there's a person who has a dwelling, and then all of a sudden a mouse appears, right? And so in order to get rid of the mouse, they get a cat, but then they have to feed the cat. So in order to feed the cat, they get a cow. So they're able to feed the cow. Listen to me. So they're able to feed the cat milk to drink from the cow. But then because they have a cow, then they have to get food to feed the cow, nice grasses and so forth. So then they get all this paraphernalia to start, tilling the land. And it goes on and on and on and on until we're finally, they have so much responsibility, trying to solve this one problem that they actually become overwhelmed. And in the end up getting rid of everything and just are like, screw it. I'm fine with that one mouse. So that's just kind of an example of how easy it is to get entangled. So it's recommended, that if you're striving on the path of yoga, that you try and keep your necessities to the bare minimum, right? That you don't acquire more than you actually need. Because the more things you acquire, the more time you have to spend maintaining those things, right? And then you end up spending your whole life trying to maintain your stuff instead of spending your valuable time on self-realization, right? So that's why Brahmins, those people that are 100% engaged in learning these things and teaching these things, they don't, that's where their consciousness is absorbed. And they also understand that if there's anything that they really need, that they can have it. When you become advanced spiritually, you have facility for different things that you need without having to actually possess everything. However, if you find yourself in a situation where you do have a lot of paraphernalia, right? You have a family, you have kids. So, you have the children to maintain and their clothing, and they need so many things, right? They need books to go to school. They need shoes on their feet. They need food to eat. If you're married, your husband needs to be taken care of. He needs clothing. Or you need to provide those different things for your wife. You have to pay for the roof over your head. Either you're paying a mortgage payment or you're renting. Then you need vehicles to get around in, right? If you live in more rural areas and more suburban areas. And then perhaps you have some pets, right? You might have cats or dogs or pet pigs or chickens and so on and so forth. And there's so many things, so many things. So Bhaktivedanta Thakur says that actually everything belongs to you. This house doesn't belong to me. These children don't belong to me. My wife doesn't belong to me. The stuff that I have doesn't belong to me. It actually all belongs to you. And because I have that consciousness, I can actually see everything as an extension of you and actually treat my children and treat my wife and treat my husband as your precious, devotees, as your precious part and parcels. And then suddenly things no longer become just an ordinary burden that you're struggling with, but it becomes an opportunity for you to see Krishna in the things that you have and to appreciate the things that you have in that way. This is called yukta vairagya. This is a way to stay in your situation in life and actually attain self-realization, yukta vairagya, using what you have in Krishna's service. But here, in this example, with the mind, right, as the chief sense organ that hopefully is operating under the intelligence, and then you have the knowledge acquiring senses, and then you have the working senses. And so now all of these things, because we're here, different desires spring up. I want to taste this, I want to see this, I want to hear this, I want to go there, I want to go here, I want to sleep, I want to mate with this person, I want to mate with that person, and it just goes on and on and on and on forever. So this is the entanglement of the pure spirit soul, which originally doesn't have anything to worry about, no rent to pay or anything. Is now, here, we are now here strongly identifying with our body and, with things that we think we own, things that we think we possess. Not that you should be irresponsible, but you see when this is taken to the nth degree, by the asuras, then they think they own everything and they can do whatever they want. And you have people that really can't control their senses. We like to think of the people that we've elected into positions of power as being self-controlled and magnanimous and so on and so forth. But that's actually not the case. It's actually quite intoxicating to be in the positions that they are, particularly in the age that we live in, because they're not taking any advice from the head, right? They're not taking any advice from people that are learned in cosmic law and in the proper way to actually run a kingdom or a country, to be able to guide the citizenry towards spiritual realization, self-realization through sense control. They have no idea what that is, They're interested in partying just like everyone else. They're just better at hiding it. Okay. All right. So it says here that when a person takes to a materialistic way of life, which is never meant to be permanent, it's always temporary to take shelter of, this transcendental knowledge and this transcendental way of life, to become free from all anxieties. So, we know all too well that nothing lasts forever, right? Everything is subject to change. Our own bodies are subject to change. The places where we lived are subject to change. Like here where I live right now, it was such a beautiful, sleepy, kind of unspoiled little surf town. But, now it's kind of gotten on the radar and all kinds of people are coming here and there's overbuilding going on and it's becoming crowded and so on and so forth. And it's, of course, of great lamentation to the people who have been living here for a long time and remember what it used to be. But try as they might, they don't seem to be able to stop these changes, right? Time goes on, time marches on, and time engenders a lot of different things. Time may change me, but I can't change time. So I leave you with that to ponder on this week as you navigate through your life. Thank you very much for being here today. And I will see you again next Monday for another edition of Mantra Monday as we explore the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, 4th Canto, and the characteristics of King Puranjana, the city of nine gates, in this wonderful allegory. Peace out.